everyone, welcome to another deck tech. So this week we are looking at Bant, Uro, Delver. Bant, not really a color combo or shard I should say that I go to when I'm thinking about Delver of secrets in Modern, but it does have green in it and it does have blue in it, and yeah, I don't get to play red, which is unfortunate because I am the Temur guy, I guess, at the end of the day. But I really wanted to give Bant Delver essentially a shot in the current meta, and I wanted to build it the way I wanted to build it, and I came up with this formula. I have to say from the get-go that I'm not super happy with Bant. White is just such an anemic color right now in essentially every format, but in Modern as well. Just doesn't play very well outside of an a Death and Taxes type build, unless you're doing something degenerate. But in terms of fair gameplay, it's not really there. Control, it's there, but even then it's mostly blue doing the heavy lifting. So yeah, Bant has a lack of reach, but I tried to make it work, and I'm happy with the result, but not happy overall with Bant. I would definitely play Temur over Bant any day. So let's look at the core and let's see what's a bit different here. So obviously we don't have access to red, which doesn't affect the creatures too much because creature wise we always stuck to blue and green anyway. So we're playing 4 Delver Secrets, of course. We're playing 4 Tarmogoyf, of course. See, if you've seen any of my previous deck techs on Delver of Secrets in Modern, you know that that's the core at all times. We're playing 2 of Uros, and I didn't go all 4 in because I didn't want it to be just another Uro deck. So Uro is there more of a support. It's not a centerpiece per se. It's not the main creature that's powering the deck. I want to make that a point, which is why I'm also playing 2 Geist of St. Traft, and it's a rare deck where you can actually play Geist of St. Traft outside of Bant spirits or whatever spirits in general. And I'm happy overall with Geist of St. Traft's performance, at least in the games that I played that I was grinding through. And just having a 2/2 body that's hexproof is decent. It's not going to win a lot of fights on the battlefield, but there are cards in this deck that I added to kind of help in those situations. But generally speaking, you want to clear it away for Geist of St. Traft anyway, so that's kind of the goal. But yeah, it attacks and it brings in a 4/4, flying angel creature token temporarily while it's attacking, which is great. It really helps finish out games. And of course, Uro, I don't have to say much about Uro. It's a great card, it's a great creature, not ban-worthy in my opinion. I think it's upping the power level of Modern as we've seen many times before. If this was 5 years ago, we were talking about how Tarmogoyf is such an essential card and how its value is justified because it's super powerful, and now Uro has taken the reins. So that's just how it is. So that's the core. So let's take a look at what's next. So the other creatures. The only other thing left is Hooting Mandrills. Playing 4 of. It's a great creature, it's a great common. I love Hooting Mandrills. You're almost never paying more than 1 green mana for it, and you're delving 5 cards out of your graveyard. It does fight a bit with Uro, but it's not a big deal, and like I said, Uros, you're not playing 4 of Uros, you're only playing 2. Plus you have Thought Scours in this deck to help fill up your graveyard. You're a very interactive deck, so your graveyard will always have ample resources. So let's move on to the cantrips. Serum Visions, 4 of course. I mean, you wouldn't play anything else. It's the best cantrip in Modern for 1 blue. That's definitely true. Up next is Thought Scour. So you're going to be most likely targeting yourself in this instance to fill up your graveyard for things like Hooting Mandrills or Uro in this instance. And you're going to be drawing a card at the same time. If your graveyard is full, you don't need to be any fuller. You could always target your opponent, have them mill 2 cards, and draw a card anyway. It's really up to you. But early game, in theory, you could get a turn 2 Hooting Mandrills with a Thought Scour and 2 fetches, which is beautiful. That's just beautiful. And you have, I believe, with the math is correct, you also have mana up for Stubborn Denial in that scenario. So that's a very powerful turn 2 play. And, having a 4/4 Trampler on the battlefield at turn 2 is pretty damn good. And then, of course, I'm playing 2 Sleight of Hands. I love Sleight of Hand. It's a nice option. Sometimes I feel it's even more powerful than Serum Visions, but only sometimes. You're looking at top 2 cards, you're choosing one, you're drawing it, the other one goes to the bottom of your library. Very useful. I love Sleight of Hand. I think 2 of works well here. Let's move on to removal. You're not playing red, unfortunately, so no Lightning Bolt, no Tarfire, nothing fancy. all you've got is Path to Exile. That being said, Path to Exile is probably the best removal, or one of the best removal in Modern. You know, it gets around indestructibility, it gets around having to deal damage to the creature to destroy it, to get rid of it. It just exiles the creature, that's it. And your opponent goes and gets a basic, not a big deal, given the fact that you just got rid of their creature and it's been exiled, so they can't even get it back from their graveyard. So you're playing 4 of, you're always going to be playing 4 of, and you're only really going to remove it against decks that don't play creatures. So the permission package. Permission package wise, not much has changed here. So you're still playing enough enablers for Stubborn Denial to be a thing. Very happy with Stubborn Denial in this deck. I have no problems with it. Force of Negation, of course, I'm a very pitch heavy player. So I like playing cards like Force of Negation that require you to pitch a card to it for it to work the way you want it to. Essentially for it to be free. You can play around with these numbers if you don't like it. If you don't like playing too much Force of Negations, or you can't afford Force of Negations, you can chuck them out, use Disrupting Shoal instead, although it takes a lot more changes to play Disrupting Shoal. Maybe you could just get rid of Force of Negation and play Stubborn Denial, sorry, not Stubborn Denials. Oh no, I'm forgetting the card. You know, that 1 blue mana that counters a 2 CMC spell. Spell Snare. Alright, there we go. I was blanking for a second and I was panicking because I don't want to reshoot this whole segment. Or you can play Spell Pierce, whatever it is. You have options for Force Negation, but I really like having this because you could be a bit more efficient with your mana. So just keep that in mind. I'm also playing Mana Leak 3 of. Again, it's a flex spot if you don't really like Mana Leak, but I think Mana Leak is just a great counter spell in Modern. So the utility. So there, I have a utility card that I'm running in here. It's Simic Charm. For those of you long-term Delver players, you know that at some point Simic Charm was the thing. You love Simic Charm, you played 1 or 2 in your deck, and it was just a great card. Obviously has run out, it's lost some favor over the years, but I think in Bant, especially if you're playing Geist of St. Traft, 2 Simic Charms, actually not that bad. You get the boost Geist of St. Traft, make it a 5/5 temporarily, your opponent might not see that. And they might just attack, they might just block it thinking they're going to kill it, and all of a sudden their creature dies. That's a great combat trick. You can also return a creature to its owner's hand, so you can either save your own creature, or you can get a creature off the battlefield that you don't want in the way, so that maybe you can kill off your opponent. So Simic Charm has some utility there. You don't have to run it. I think, again, this is kind of a flex spot. You can remove it if you don't need the boosting ability, the +2/+3. You could maybe play Vapor Snag in its place. That also works to give you extra removal, but I like Simic Charm and its utility, essentially giving you 3 options. So let's get on to the lands. That's it for spells. Land-wise, very similar mana base to my Temur Delver decks. You're still running you're running 4 shocks, you're running 10 fetches, and you're running, in this case, 4 basics, but you're not running 2 islands, which is what I usually do. So I run 2 islands, 1 forest. Here, plains is a thing. You do need access to white. Sometimes you're going to need access to double white because of your sideboard. So the ability to go fetch just a plains card is going to be important. Plus, you're not playing red here, so you are softer to Blood Moon. So if you know you're going to be playing a Blood Moon opponent, it's best to have access to white. And green and blue, all 3 colors, so you can fetch for them accordingly depending on what you think your opponent's going to be playing. So I think having the split 1/1/1 between the 3 basics is going to be important here. So that's pretty much it for the lands. Nothing too crazy here. I think for a list that's running 17 lands, this is pretty much what you need. Sorry, I said 17, so I should say it's 18 lands in this case. So let's get on to the sideboard. So again, sideboard really can play with this. It's really going to be meta dependent, games playstyle dependent. This is what I ended up with at the end. Veil of Summer, it's legal, play it. It's very, very powerful against blue and black decks. You're always going to want it. It's almost never a dead card, especially when you have it early on in the game. So Veil of Summer, very good card, very powerful. Play it if you have it. Buy it if you don't. They're not that expensive, luckily. Engineer Explosives is just my go-to for kind of like a catch-all in terms of a sweeper, so you can play it for 0 and kill a bunch of tokens, which is very useful. Sometimes maybe against Storm or, the Mardu midrange, where they're creating a bunch of tokens from the Pyromancer creatures. So engineer explosives can be useful here, or since you have access to up to 3 colors in your deck, you can use it to destroy essentially any permanent that's up to 3 CMC. So you could target an enchantment, an artifact, whatever it is, a planeswalker. So engineer explosives can be used quite usefully here. I'm also using Celestial Purge to remove a black or red permanent. Can be useful against certain decks, getting rid of big red creatures or big black or even small black creatures in this case, like Death's Shadow. So Celestial Purge, pretty useful here, but you can remove it for something else. I was trying out Oust for a while, which was kind of cute, but I settled on Celestial Purge. Just kind of catches a bit more of what's going on in Modern right now. Ashiok Dreamrender to take care of your graveyard strategies. So, you know, you are playing Uro, so Grafdigger's Cage isn't necessarily the best option here. So I prefer Ashiok Dreamrender. But, you know, if Uro is not too big of a concern for you or not playing Uro, I would probably just put Grafdigger's Cage in place of Ashiok Dreamrender. But that's just it. You know, it's what I ended up with at the end. Playing 3 Spreading Seas. I don't have access to red, so I can't play Blood Moon or Alpine Moon or anything in terms of land disruption in red. So Spreading Seas is going to be my best option here for Valakut decks or Cavern of Souls, or just shutting off my opponent from particular colors when blue is not in their deck. So Spreading Seas is very important. It can be very important, very powerful, and it cantrips for you get to draw a card off of it. So all of that, very, very good. Worst case, if your opponent gets rid of it, it's an enchantment that will boost your Tarmogoyf. Last but not least, Skyclave Apparition. You know, the second most played creature apart from Uro and Modern right now. Very powerful, being able to exile basically a permanent of CMC 4 or less when it comes into the battlefield. And when it dies, that permanent doesn't come back. Your opponent just gets a token that's power and toughness are equal to the CMC of the permanent that you got rid of. So, you know, pretty useful. It is double white, so you're gonna have to make sure you fetch accordingly when you're sideboarding it in. But a very powerful removal card that kind of, again, is kind of like a catch-all for 4 CMC or less, which will basically catch most things in Modern. Anything higher than that, if it's a creature that's more than 4 CMC, you have Path to Exile anyway. So Skyclave Apparition is pretty cool there in the sideboard. Last but not least, the matchup. So again, I would have to say that if you're serious about Bant, Uro Delver, you're definitely going to have to grind even more than I did. This is definitely going to be a list that I'm going to have to come back to. But it does have some play against certain decks. I feel that overall Temur Delver is probably going to be better, but let's focus on Bant Uro Delver here. So against combo, you're not that bad. You still have a very large permission package. You have Force of Negation, Stubborn Denial, Mana Leak. You could sideboard accordingly as well. You know, if you're playing a lot of combo decks, Engineer Explosives for Storm, for example, for Empty the Warrens. So you have a lot of options for combo. I think Temur Delver has always been strong with combo, as long as your opening hand is, you know, decent. So combo decks here for Bant, Uro Delver are also okay. Aggro decks, this is where things get a bit iffy, because yes, you do have Path to Exile to path, you know, they're creatures, but it's not as efficient as just having a bunch of lightning bolts and maybe a Tarfire or, you know, or a Braid or whatever, you know, to be able to get rid of creatures a bit more differently without necessarily ramping your opponent. I just feel that although you can deal with aggro decks, you have enough creatures to kind of keep them at bay. You lose a few points because you have Path to Exile, but you don't have anything else in red. You know, red's really the efficient creature removal in terms of damage-based removal, and you don't have that here. So, and sometimes you just need to hit face and, you know, hit your opponent in the face and kill them that way to get the last few points in, and you don't have that ability here. So your play against aggro actually diminishes a bit. But I think overall, at the very least, you're 50-50 neutral, which is not bad. Big mana decks. So here, it's not that bad. You know, here is where damage-based removal plays a lesser role, and where Path to Exile, for example, does a lot better. Or other white removal spells that I didn't necessarily cover in this deck tech, but you can bring in to deal with, you know, a Thought-Knot Seer, Reality Smasher, you know, anything bigger that your opponent's going to be bringing out. You're pretty well suited here. The only downside is you don't have access to Blood Moon, so that's definitely going to hurt you in terms of Tron, for example. So Spreading Seas can only go so far. You could slow them down by Spreading Seas one of their Tron pieces, but they'll probably find a way to get that missing Tron piece, either naturally drawing it or fetching for it with Expedition Map. So I think you're already not so favored against big mana, and it's a bit, a bit worse with Bant Uro Delver. It's just, at least in my experience and the way I would see it. Of course, you could always make adjustments to your deck to up your win percentages if you're concerned about Tron-like decks. Not Magic. Nothing changes here for Bant Uro Delver. I mean, it's a flip of a coin. Your opponent is either going to have the nuts or they're not. If they're not, you have a good chance. If they have the nuts, forget it. There's very little that you can do, especially game 1, to slow them down. Ashiok Dreamrender is something you're going to have to lean on heavily in sideboarded games to kind of shut down their graveyard and slow them down enough for you to pick up steam and, you know, kill them. But that's essentially it. Now, what's cool about Bant Uro that you can't say about Temur is that you do have Path to Exile. So exiling their creatures, you know, they don't go back to the graveyard, they can't be dredged back. That is powerful, but it's single targets, and you can only run 4 Path to Exiles, so there's going to be a limit there. But that does help you out a bit, so you might actually have a bit more game against Dredge in Bant as opposed to Temur, because you do have exiling effects and not just go to the graveyard, which for them is a joke. Control, or control decks, permission decks, whatever they may be, you're not that bad here either. You have Path to Exile if you're really concerned about artifacts. You can play Disenchant in the sideboard, although it's very rare to see Disenchant in Modern. Skyclave Apparition should cover you for most instances when you're playing against control decks. Again, I think more or less 50-50 here. It would be nice to have access to red to kind of finish off your opponent by hitting them in the face or getting rid of a Snapcaster Mage without further ramping your opponent. But yeah, it is what it is. I'd say 50-50. Finally, mid-range. Again, here, going to be a bit of a toss-up. Creature-wise, you're pretty well suited. You do have a hexproof Geist of St. Traft, which is good. It's not going to be able to be targeted by, by removal spells, by black removal spells, or red removal spells, whatever it may be, which is going to be very useful against mid-range decks. But, it also has a 2/2 body, so you're going to have to lean on Simic Charm or getting rid of their creatures as quickly as possible so that Geist of St. Traft, for example, could run through. But you also have Uro, you also have Tarmogoyf and Hooting Mandrills, and Delver of Secrets. So against mid-range decks, I think you have quite a bit of play. I had a good experience against mid-range decks, so I think probably one of your best matchups, other than combo, is going to be mid-range decks. So yeah, I think it is what it is. Combo decks and mid-range decks are probably going to be the best matchups for Bant Uro Delver, and I think that's perfectly fine. You see a lot of that right now in Modern. And that's pretty much it for Bant Uro Delver. So let me know what you think. I'm going to be posting up 3 matches as usual today. That's what you get with all my deck techs. So stay tuned for that to see some of the matches that I played and how the deck actually feels, and how it actually deals with different types of threats. But yeah, let me know what you think about Bant Delver in general. If there's other cards I should consider when I revisit this deck later on this year, most likely. Yeah, I would really be interested to hear what you have to say. Bant is not necessarily a color shard that I go to often, so your input here would be useful. Like I said, I don't like white. White is generally a weak color. I don't know why it's like that, but it is what it is. It has a few strong white spells, and that's it. Everything else is good when you're behind, which is not necessarily what you want to be, and it's not what you want to be doing in a tempo deck like Delver. So yeah, that's just my opinion. So if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Enjoy my content in general, please subscribe, hit notification bell, follow me on Twitter, Facebook, whatever you prefer. All social media helps me out, helps spread the word, helps favor me with the overbearing algorithms that favors larger channels to smaller ones. And if you're interested in becoming a patron and supporting this channel that way, check out the Patreon link in the description of this video. A big thank you to all my patrons, of course, for your ever-growing support and the growing Patreon community. I think it's really great. I really love interacting with all of you and getting your feedback, so that's really cool. Check out the tiers. I've set them up in a really cool way where I essentially send you free money back at the end of the year, just as a thank you for supporting me. So check that out. Thanks, and have a good one.